This week on Sprague River Homestead, it's a homestead pizza recipe, and it's delicious.
Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is have a container, about 3 to 6 quarts, depending on how much room you have in the fridge. And the reason you do this is because when you make your dough, after you raise it, you put it in the refrigerator and it sits there for the next 2 weeks while you use it. So you need a pretty big container with a lid. Doesn't have to fit terribly tight because, as the recipe says, you actually don't want airtight. So the first thing we do is we're going to use 3.5 cups of lukewarm to warm water. I just use the hottest stuff that comes out of our tap because our tap is not set terribly high. Then we're going to put in our yeast. And what's different about this pizza recipe compared to a lot of them, there's no yeast proofing. So all we're going to do now that we've got our water in is we're going to go a tablespoon and a half of yeast. It does not have to be exactly precise, so pretty close is good. And then the recipe calls for a tablespoon and a half of kosher coarse salt. I don't like quite that much salt, so we only use just over a tablespoon. So I just kind of go a generous tablespoon, put that in there. And then it's going to call for 7.5 cups of unbleached flour. There are recipes in the book for whole wheat, for different flours, if you prefer to use something different. Like I said, this is what I typically have, so this is what we use the most of. Okay, once all your ingredients are in, you're just going to stir it with a spoon, or if you have a Danish dough hook like I do, a gift from my grandmother-in-law, we're just going to mix all that together. And all you're trying to do is just get all your ingredients wet. What you're going to find is that it makes kind of a loose but damp dough. Like it tends not to get terribly dough-like. If you're used to making homemade breads, you know what I mean, as far as it'll make a big clump. This kind of makes lots of little damp clumps that raise together. You do want to do this step by hand. The book says pretty specifically do not use an electric stand mixer because you'll actually over mix it, and that would be bad. What it'll do is it'll mess with your yeast a little bit. So I'm going to get all this mixed up. So now that we've got our dough all mixed, you can kind of see it's kind of clumpy. What you're making sure is that you've got everything wet. So make sure you kind of mix through there and that there are no dry spots, no flour that you miss. Kind of scrape all the flour that kind of sticks to the side down. And from here, we are going to take our lid and just loosely set our lid on and leave it for the next 2.5 hours. So when we come back, it should be risen all the way to the top, and then it'll be ready to go in the refrigerator. And there it is after 2 hours, so it is heading into the refrigerator. Okay, so now that we've made our pizza dough, we're going to go ahead and make a pizza. We've actually used this pizza dough already once. This big container will make about 3 pizzas of this size, or several if you go a little smaller. First thing you do before you start pulling out your pizza dough, you're going to go ahead and start your oven on just about the closest to high setting that you can get. For mine, it goes about 450 degrees, so I've got it on, it's warming. You don't actually have to do a traditional preheat for this. You just go ahead and start it, let it warm up while you're doing it, and stick it in as soon as you're ready. So, like I said, I've already used this once, so you can see the level of the pizza dough has dropped quite a bit. It's going to be pretty tacky. So I do a couple of things. One, you're going to take a big handful of flour, cornmeal, whatever you prefer. We just use flour. The actual recipe calls for cornmeal. So I put a little on that. That's going to keep it from sticking. Otherwise, you will never get this pizza off the pizza pan without destroying it. And then I'm going to take about half that dough. So I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle the half I'm taking out with flour. And it's not going to be a precise thing. You can leave as much of it in there as you want. Scrape as much of it out. If it's really doughy on the underside, like this one kind of is, you can add a little more flour. What you're trying to do is get the dough up. Okay. So now that we've got a ball, take it over here, and you just kind of stretch it a little bit. You're going to need that flour kind of in. You're going to make kind of a big disc, and then once you've got that, start spreading the disc. I like to do this part up in the air just a little bit because it'll kind of stretch the dough out a little bit easier. If you get holes in it, don't worry about it because you're going to press them all back in. So once you've got it on there, since mine is getting pretty tacky, if yours isn't, you don't have to put more flour on it, but mine's pretty tacky. Put a little more flour on it and then start stretching. And believe it or not, this part of your hand is the easiest way to get this stuff to press out. You can kind of use the palm of your hand, but I found that for whatever reason, that part seems to keep it from tearing a little bit. And if you do get a tear, like there's a hole, bring it over, pinch it closed, and just keep going. Since this is a rustic pizza dough, you don't have to do any of that fancy throwing it in the air stuff. Unless you so choose to try. I've never done it. I'm a bit clumsy. I figure I'll have pizza dough stuck to my ceiling. And nobody wants that. And you're going to go as thin as you want this to be. I like to get mine about 1/4 of an inch. Like I said, you can make smaller pizzas, but I am feeding 2 men on the farm and myself. So we go with a pretty big pizza. Alright, so there we go. Your pizza dough is stretched, and it will start trying to move in, so you got to kind of start putting your toppings on pretty quick. Alright, so I'm going to put the pizza dough back in the refrigerator, and then we'll start putting the toppings on. Alright, so for our pizza sauce, you can use whatever you want. They actually make pizza sauce. A couple years ago, I actually canned some pizza sauce. Of course, I'm out of that now. I actually just use some cheap spaghetti sauce. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put it on there. As thick as you like it. So I usually just put a big glob of it on there and kind of spread it out. And now we're going to start with our toppings. We're doing a traditional pepperoni pizza. We like the original and the turkey pepperoni. Sometimes we buy the uncured. So you're just going to go ahead and layer your pepperoni on there in any way you want to do it. Alright, once you've got your toppings on, now it's time for the cheese. I use a whole mix of a lot of stuff. I've got a little bit of cheddar left from another meal. I've got some, kind of hand-pulled mozzarella that I'm going to tear and put some pieces on. I like a little Parmesan, and then just your store-bought shredded mozzarella. They make actual pizza cheese blends if you want, but I find that I don't want a cheese in the refrigerator that's just good for one thing, so I just buy the mozzarella, get a big bag of it, and use it for everything. So we're going to go ahead and put our cheese on. And how much or how little cheese you put on is entirely dependent on what your family likes. We like a fair amount of cheese. Alright. If you're using a dry cheese, just remember this stuff melts. Parmesan, Asiago, any of that hard cheese melts at a different rate. So don't put a whole lot on it. It will take a whole long time to cook. A little more mozzarella on there. Alright, and it is up to you if that's where you want to stop with it and put it in. We actually like a little Italian seasoning on ours. So I go ahead and put a little on there. You can put garlic, powdered garlic on there if you like. Basil, whatever you want to do. She's ready. We're going to put it in the oven. And we're going to set the first timer for 20 minutes and come back and check at it. At a lower elevation, 20 minutes is usually about all it takes. But we're at a pretty high elevation, so we check it at 20. Oftentimes we have to go another 5 or 10 minutes. But start at 20 and kind of adjust from there. And so we'll come back in 20 minutes and see how it's doing.
Alright, so after 20 minutes, we're going to give it a few more minutes. It's still kind of golden brown here, not dark enough yet. So we'll put it in for another 5 and check it again. So once you have your pizza golden brown enough to where you're comfortable with it, just take a simple flat spatula and you're just going to get it up off the pan. Now the flour should make it so it doesn't stick, but kind of along the edges where the cheese is and that, you might have to work it loose. And just kind of work it loose all the way around. Get it where it's up off the pan. It might stick the crust a little bit. Once it's loose there, you can then cut it. So now you can just cut it in 8, 4, 6, whatever pieces you want to. With 3 of us, we're going to cut it in 9. And then just take it off, put it on a plate. Once it's done, just get all your ooey gooey cheese up on a plate, grab a fork, or just eat with your fingers. That's it from this time on Spread River Homestead. And a reminder, the pizza recipe we've been using and the book we're getting out of, we will have a link in the description there to an Amazon link. Go ahead and there and click on that if you'd like to buy the book or at least see what it's about. That's it for this time. I want to get some pizza. We'll see you next time.